Hi, earlier today I watched Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist, the partially unreleased prequel to The Exorcist from 2005. It had an unusual background, and it's worth looking at in the context of the entire series, which I've recently rewatched. The original film is widely regarded as a masterpiece, a classic, um, one of the greatest films and one of the greatest horror films of all time. I've never really taken to it. I think it's interesting. I think it has some unusual and original ideas for a serious modern picture, but I've never really engaged with it on a horror level. I've never found it frightening or disturbing in any way. I've often thought that this is because I'm not religious in any way, but friends of mine who also aren't religious have found it disturbing, so maybe there's some other more complex reason. Exorcist 2 has been covered in the podcast, and it's a film that is both interesting and original and takes a bold, different stance on the material, but is also at times hilariously absurd and misjudged in a lot of ways. Exorcist 3 is a true sequel to the original film. It's more serious and down the line. It, again, has some interesting ideas, but it was compromised by the producers and the studio. There is a director's cut called Legion, which I've never seen. And then some years after that, we had Paul Schrader being hired to direct a prequel to The Exorcist, in which the young Father Merrin, played by Max von Sydow in the original film, now played by Stellan Skarsgård, recovering from his experiences and guilt during World War II, is involved in an archaeological dig in Kenya in the late 1940s. There's tension between the local British Army and tribespeople, and a church is uncovered buried underneath the desert sand. Inside, Merrin and his team discover a complete church, but it appears to be constructed on top of something else as strange events occur, and a demon appears to be taking hold of the surrounding area. Um, the film was delivered to the producers. They didn't like it. They felt that it wasn't sufficiently scary, that it was too serious and too talky. So Schrader was fired. Rennie Harlan was hired to replace him, and rather than just reshoot part of the movie, it was decided to reshoot pretty much the entire film. I think there is perhaps one shot in the film that looks like it was reused from the previous version, maybe some of one other sequence as well. And a completely new script was written based on the earlier draft. That became Exorcist: The Beginning, released in 2004, which I saw at the time. Features Isabella Scorupco, James Darcy, and Alan Ford in supporting roles, recast, having not appeared in the original movie. And the following year, after The Beginning did so badly, Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist, Schrader's version, was given a limited release. It's a bit funky in places. Some of the effects work is quite poor because Schrader had to finish it in a hurry. Some of the music is quite weak. And there is a new metal song over the end credits, which feels incredibly inappropriate. It's superior to Exorcist: The Beginning, but only insofar as a 2.5 star movie is superior to a 2 star movie. Exorcist: The Beginning is quite bad, but Dominion is not that great. It is more serious, it is more thoughtful, it is putting more of an effort into um, giving Merrin a serious character conflict and making him a more complex character. His reasons for walking away from the church are given a bit more weight in this version. The lack of obvious love interest, I think, works a lot better. Isabella Scorupco's character of the missionary doctor still exists, but is played by a different actor. And the relationship between the two is downplayed. It's much more of sort of a developing amicable friendship rather than a potential romance. The nature of the possession and the exorcism is, I think, a lot more serious. The exorcism itself still looks fairly ridiculous. One element that is played up that is completely removed from the Harlan version is the conflict between the local tribespeople and the British Army, the imperialism aspect, and the rising tensions being exploited by the demon. I think here work extremely well, and the parallels between where the British Army is behaving as occupiers of British East Africa and the Nazi occupying force that Marion dealt with during the war. I think there are some interesting parallels there, some interesting tensions that maybe could have been capitalized on a little more, but are completely absent from the second version. It's not a great film. It's interesting to watch the two side by side, almost as a case study to see how different directors approach similar material. Um, but it's not particularly a great film in its own right. It kind of reinforces my idea that the Exorcist movies have one strong entry, the original, and although some of the subsequent films have some interesting ideas, they can't ever make it work because the original concept of an ordinary young girl in an ordinary American city being possessed by a demon is such a great concept, and to repeat it is to just repeat it, and they can't do anything else without going too far from the original concept. Um, Exorcist Believer, the first in a alleged trilogy of sequels released last year, was one of the worst films of the year, um, and it showed that you're just doing the same thing again. It's an inherently limited concept. It is amusing to note that Stellan Skarsgård has been in as many Exorcist films as Ellen Burstyn or Jason Miller or Max von Sydow from the original movies. Only Linda Blair has been in more. She's been in three, um, the first two and Believer. But Minion is really only a film that is notable for its quirks of production. There are a few interesting elements within the film itself, but I don't think there's really enough there for me to recommend